Yes, without further ado, welcome to Backyard Bird Battles. This is an event that I've been super excited for, looking forward to, um, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be pretty casual. I'm hoping we'll have some time for some Q&A at the end so we can learn from our two um, participants or yeah, our two folks here. But first, I wanted to welcome you all to Fall Flyway Festival. And if you're not familiar with Fall Flyway Festival, it is our celebration of the connection between birds and native plants, which is so evident here in the fall as so many birds are migrating across our landscape. I want to recognize all of the patrons who make this event and all of the events that happen during Fall Flyway Festival possible. So if you're a patron, thank you very much for your support, as well as our sponsors for Fall Flyway Festival. Um, and yeah, with that said, I think we're going to dive right into things and we're going to kind of give an overview of why some of this stuff is important, as fun and silly as it can be at times. Um, the implications of some of the crazy birding that you're going to hear about today actually has some a lot of positives for from a conservation standpoint. So we'll kind of go over that. Then we'll do some intros of our two participants for today, and they'll set the stage of telling us a little bit about their backyards and how they've evolved over time. And then we're going to be going back and forth talking about cool plants and tons of birds and observations and other wildlife, and we're going to have a good time. But if anybody needs closed captions, you should be able to enable those on your um, Zoom toolbar at the bottom of the top of your screen. If you have questions or concerns, feel free to enter them in the chat and we'll try to pay attention to those. But I am hoping that we'll have time for some questions at the end of this event. And yeah, I think without further ado, we're going to go ahead and dive into why all of this is so important. So, unfortunately, as many of us know, a lot of our birds are in decline. And I think there's nothing better to highlight how much you can do in tiny spaces by kind of hearing from our two participants today about how they've taken a small, relatively small spaces and turned them into places that are beneficial to birds. And so we've found that biggest drivers of bird decline over the past 50 years are habitat loss and habitat degradation. And so every little bit and piece of habitat counts. If you're familiar with Doug Tallamy, you know he's kind of proposed this idea of a homegrown national park. If everybody takes bits and pieces of their yard and turns it into native habitat, habitats that healthy and can support birds, then we can make a huge difference for not only birds but lots of other wildlife. And so yeah, this is at the end of the day, I think really important just to note and think about. And it's also something that can be really gratifying. And Bob and Richard might be able to speak to that a bit today about maybe how they have felt like they've played a small role in conservation of birds and inspiring others to get connected with them. Um, and so, yeah, I want to take a moment to highlight our wildlife sanctuary program, which really takes this idea of taking a small space and doing a lot with it. It's for any property or piece of a property from 50 square feet to 3 acres. And we also have a newer habitat stewardship program for larger properties. But the sanctuary program's, yeah, really geared at those smaller properties. And we have some requirements, and you can apply. Our website has a lot of really good resources to help you get started. We have a sanctuary newsletter that we send out regularly that includes updates and ideas. And both Bob and Richard have certified wildlife sanctuaries. And so, yeah, just wanted to highlight that program and be happy to answer questions about it at the end of this presentation. But now I want to kind of set the stage, and let you all know sort of what you're getting into, because the battle between Bob and Richard has been going on for a while, and I'm gonna have them elaborate on that shortly. But I've been following along as a an audience member to this ongoing battle for a while via social media, and it's been really fun to watch. It's been really entertaining to see how Bob and Richard have gone back and forth, sharing really unique observations. It's just super cool from a landscape scale ornithological perspective, thinking about the different birds that are moving across our landscapes and seeing the perspectives that two individuals have from their backyards on these birds and how they're using the landscapes. And you can see here there's a lot of fun jeering back and forth. I really like Richard when you said um, the least flycatcher, bathing in the tears of Bob Zaremba, I mean my pond. You guys have gotten quite creative over time, and I want to go ahead and pass it over to both of you to introduce yourselves. Tell us a little bit about who you are and kind of how this battle began, and from there we'll go into introductions of your yards themselves. So, Richard, you want to take it off or start first and introduce yourself and help paint the picture of this ongoing online battle?
Sure. Yeah, hi, I'm Richard Hall. I live in Athens, and I work at the University of Georgia in the Odum School of Ecology, where I mostly sit in front of a computer, but think about birds and bird conservation quite a bit. And kind of early in my time in Athens, I really liked the idea of attracting birds to my yard, and I hit on this idea that I had a little stone bird bath, and that was attracting robins. It once attracted a veery, but I thought, wouldn't it be nice to have a more natural looking pond? And one thing led to another, and I sort of talked myself up into actually having a stream that falls into a pond that's powered by a pump that circulates water. And from the second that pond was installed, I think the very day after it was installed, there was an American redstart in there, and the next day a flock of cedar waxwings. And I thought this is really good. And then Bob, who I'd known, through a lot of birding throughout Georgia, I'd met him a number of times, seeing rare birds, been on the pelagics he organized. I once had the good fortune of going to his house to look for a rare hummingbird that we'll hear about later. Although Bob and Deb weren't in, but they graciously allowed me access to their yard, and I thought this is pretty good. Could use a water feature, but it's a nice yard. Um, so imagine my horror when, for years I've been enjoying all these birds at my pond, and suddenly I see this picture on Facebook from Bob saying, I've put a pond in my yard. I'm like, don't you have enough birds already, Bob? Um, and sure enough, I think pretty quickly Bob started getting really great birds at his pond. So I think I'll hand over to you there, Bob.
Thanks, Richard. I appreciate that. Um, Bob Zaremba. I'm live here in Marietta, Georgia. Deb and I have a little house, maybe about a third of an acre, just your normal suburban lot. You'll see later on in the presentation we what it looked like when we got here, and some of the things we did to kind of improve our habitat. But as Richard said, we were doing a lot to feed birds and to provide shelter and food and do whatever we could. And then I started seeing all this stuff on Facebook from this guy named Richard Hall over in Athens. And he kept posting all these really cool pictures of warblers and vireos and orioles, and they were all coming into his little stream. Now, I got a little jealous, I have to admit. And it spurred me to say, well, you know what? I've got this path in the middle of my yard, and we don't really use it. So, I think it would make a really good stream. So I got out a shovel, I got out big pond, and I worked on it for a couple of days, and I laid it out, and I got it going. And just like Richard said, the day I set it up, I was sitting there watching it, and within an hour, I had a couple of chestnut-sided warblers bathing in the stream. So it's magic, really, what a water feature can do in your yard. So of course I immediately posted that on Facebook, tagged Richard, and told him I was coming after him. And I think over the past couple of years, we've had a pretty good time going back and forth on what we've been seeing in our yards. So, and I think you'll see a little bit of that here. If you haven't seen us doing it on Facebook, it is pretty funny to watch. So, Gabe, back to you, maybe.
Yep. Yeah, that's fantastic. That's a great outline of kind of how it all started and how, yeah, birds are bringing people together, and heating battles
Driving
online.
people apart.
Yes. So I'm going to change, let's see, my, uh, what I'm sharing here. And, um, Richard, are you able to see your first slide here of your backyard transformation?
No.
Okay, let me stop share and reshare real quick. All right. So yeah, right now we're going to transition into outlining what these yards look like and how they have changed over time. So you should be able to see it now. Can you see it now, Richard?
Yeah, there we
All
go.
right. So just tell me when to hit the next
Yeah,
slide.
sure.
And,
Sure. So, yeah, this is my backyard. So, our lot is about sort of a quarter of an acre total. It's fairly long, not very wide. When I bought the house, I thought it looked like it had birding potential with this kind of cathedral of water oaks providing closed canopy. And when I started out on my backyard transformation, I didn't know my plants at all. As you might tell, I'm not originally from Georgia. So I asked a buddy who I knew from my local Audubon Society, who was also a landscape architect, to walk around the yard with me and tell me what plants I should keep and which ones I should remove. This was Krista Gridley, for those of you that know her. And she walked around the yard with me and didn't say anything. And I said, well, what can I keep? And she said, everything in the understory has to go because everything there are these kind of like non-native and in some cases invasive plants that had sort of relatively little value for wildlife. And so, I had this blank canvas, and I think that's what you're seeing there, where there's basically oaks over the top and then just a kind of ratty looking lawn. You may have just heard a chip of a hooded warbler that has immediately flown into my pond. You can move forward now, Gabe.
all right, let's see. Boom.
Um, yeah, so kind of the next step was that I started sort of shrinking that threadbare lawn and starting to think about sort of canopy complexity or structure. So I wanted to get some nice kind of small trees and shrubs to kind of put around the edges of the space, and I put that little island in the middle of the yard there to create some of this structure. And then I thought, well, this is still quite a lot of green lawn. So I shrunk the lawn even further, and by this stage, I'd been to a lot of native plant sales, and so I'd added a lot of kind of native wildflowers that support pollinators. And I guess there's one more last slide. So that was kind of this summer, where now I'm down to like a postage stamp of a lawn and a lot more sort of flower beds. And I guess I have the advantage of sitting in here now. So this is you might hear a chipping hooded warbler that's at my pond, and we're getting some nice fall wildflowers like this blue mist and wing stem and a monarda, a bee balm there as well. Yeah.
Yeah, so you're sitting right there on the left side of this image in that screen porch currently, right?
Yes, and maybe you could point with the arrow to where the pond is. It's kind of like straight out from there, so I'm kind of looking down the stream at all the birds that are coming in, and I've set up a little kind of like viewing hatch in the screen porch there, so I can stick my camera through and get photographs to tease Bob with.
And let's move to the front yard.
Yeah, so this gives you a sense of my neighborhood. Sort of everybody's got a lawn. There's a few big trees, and yeah, all of the shrubs in the front yard at this stage were kind of like these big box store non-natives, and that included a ring of a plant called Nandina or heavenly bamboo, which is not a great plant to have in your yard because the berries contain trace elements of cyanide, and they can actually be toxic to birds if ingested in large quantities. So I wanted to get rid of my, I thought the lawn was useless, and I wanted to sort of like try and reduce the amount of lawn and see if I could put in pollinator beds. But I was a little scared of how my neighbors would react, so I started doing this very piecemeal. So yeah, like this next slide, I put in having learned the hard way that Georgia red clay is hard to dig into. I decided in the front yard to sort of create some raised beds, and I sort of put some in, and then I got a little carried away, and I kept going and thought, who needs a front lawn anyway? Um, and yeah, so at some point, my front yard became a sort of giant pollinator meadow with these kind of towering bee balms and various cone flowers. You can forward to, I think
Cool.
this is
There we go.
one or two. Yeah, there you go. This is what it looks like now. So all of those species are still present, but I guess also it's always good to be kind of mindful of your neighbors and get them on board with your native landscaping. So I've tried to sort of move around some of those plants. So I have mostly lower growing things close to the street, so they're not towering over the street or flopping into the street. And those kind of larger sunflowers and coneflowers are kind of like behind that big kind of wax myrtle in the middle of the picture. So it's sort of still trying to make it look wildish, but have some structure that keeps an open line of sight to the house, which is sometimes used as a kind of cue of care that people know that I'm maintaining this yard rather than letting it just sort of grow totally wild. So the front yard is more of a tightrope walk of keeping the neighbors happy while creating habitat. And the backyard, I've kind of like, certainly the back of the backyard, I've let grow a little more wild.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think I love that you highlight the idea of cues of care because that's so important when you're doing this kind of stuff because a lot of folks aren't necessarily comfortable or don't understand the concepts behind gardening for wildlife just yet. And so that's really great. And then also like the piecemeal approach where you can do a little bit at a time is so makes it so accessible, makes it a lot easier because yeah, you don't have to do it all at once. You really can do a tiny bit at a time and you can learn a lot from it and improve the way that you are working on things. So now I'm going to switch over to some slides of Bob's yard here. All right. All right, Bob, you want to take it away?
Sure thing. So very similar to Richard's story. We moved into this house. It was 1987, and it was just basically grass and a few shrubs that the builders had put in, and it probably stayed that way for a good 3 or 4 or 5 years. Before we really got more active with birding. As we got more involved with birds and understanding their environment and what they required, we started to get more involved with trying to plant things that were beneficial to the birds in general. Now, unlike Richard, we kind of took a couple of wrong turns, probably. Some of the things that we have in our pollinator garden and some of the things that are growing are probably not as helpful and native as we can. But what we've been trying to do is replace it piece by piece. And Gabe said it. It's a process. We've been going through this a number of times. You can see this is just a view of the side of our house on the road, and it was a blank slate. This was what we thought a good pollinator garden would look like. Unfortunately, that's a lot of lantana there. It's so developed right now, we just haven't tackled trying to replace that with more native species. We do get a ton of butterflies, bees, insects that love the lantana, but as everyone knows, it's not the best plant. But it's what we have there right now, and it'll stay that way until we get around to kind of working on that side of the yard. So the backyard was also quite a bit of work. I think if you can flip to the next screen, you'll see.
There we go.
Well, actually, I'm sorry. That was still the front, but that's okay. You can see in our front yard, if you want to go back one, we just the front part of the front yard is now mostly native plants, as it goes into the little area where we have that lantana, as is the front of the garden onto the right. So it's the hummingbirds love it, the butterflies love it. We're continuing to work on that part of the yard. If you go flip me to the backyard again, Gabe, thanks. So we moved into this house, and one of the reasons that we purchased this house was because it was on this small neighborhood pond. It had just a little, probably a couple of acre retention pond, or farm pond, if you will, from the farmland that was here before they built the subdivision. And we knew that that would be a good source for birds and for wildlife. Predominantly, as it was all grass going down to the pond, and little by little, mainly because it took me 5 or 6 hours to mow the lawn, we had to get rid of the grass. So as I started to do that, we started to build these little islands, like Richard had mentioned, and then we started to get those islands started to combine into things. So it eventually, at some point, we ended up with hardly any backyard and just what I would call more of a canopy and an oasis for wildlife, and it turned out to be pretty good. The last thing that we changed,
Bob,
and we
sorry to interrupt, but I
yeah,
had someone put in the Q&A that the slides are not showing. So
okay.
I just wanted to take a moment, and if any of our participants can mention in the chat if they have been able to see the slides, or I can try stop sharing and resharing my screen in case that helps. But
I mean, they are showing on my screen, Gabe, but
okay, okay, we've got a
Same,
no.
same here. Sometimes in Zoom, you can accidentally tab out of a screen. So, like when I look at the top of my screen, it said sort of webinar that was just the picture of the three of us, and there was another tab to the left. So, there might be another bit of the screen you could click in to restore the share screen.
Yeah,
But
here. All right, let's try this again.
it's a chestnut-sided warbler in the yard right now.
And I'm
show
gonna
off.
see if we can do this.
I'm looking now. I'm going to see what we got.
All right. Now I'm sorry, participants, can you once again go ahead and let me know if you can see the slides now? I stopped sharing and reshared. You can go ahead and let's see, we've got a response. Yes, great. All right. Sorry to interrupt, Bob. If you want to continue, yeah, going around
Yeah,
with
no
your
problem.
backyard journey.
No problem. Yeah. So as I was saying, the backyard kind of converted into more of just a completely covered area. And as you can see, this last slide shows quite a bit of change from where we were with all the grass, and now the evolution into more of a wildlife sanctuary, with a little shot on the right there of the creek or the little pond that we put in. And one thing I'll point out is, unlike Richard's yard, who has a predominant oak story, we've got mostly sweet gum, tulip poplar, pine, and it brings, I think it brings in a different number of species than Richard gets. We get a few different things than he does. He gets a few things we don't get, and I think a lot of it has to do with the overstory and what we've got coming in and what he does. So, okay,
Awesome. So
that's our.
yeah, Athens and Marietta, and yeah, some similar but also different journeys along the way. Both ended up with some ponds, and yeah, now I was hoping we could highlight some of the cool native plants that kind of have really brought the life to these spaces. Um, and yeah, I think let's start with a classic. Richard, you want to talk about some of the excitement of coneflowers and seeds in your backyard?
Yeah, so there's a variety of cone flowers. This is the sort of classic pink cone flower that is widely available, not just in native only plant nurseries, but you find this in a lot of places. There's a variety of other cone flower species of different colors. There's a gray-headed cone flower that I love as well, and these plants produce these lovely seed heads. So before they produce the seed, they're a great resource for pollinating insects. So I see a lot of bumblebees, native bumblebees on these plants. And then in the late summer, they're producing a lot of seeds. And they are loved by American goldfinches, kind of a breeding species around here that actually times its breeding a bit later than a lot of other insect-eating birds to capitalize on feeding these seeds to its offspring. So they're chowing down on the seeds right now. And I guess, the picture on the right here, I guess I just wanted to emphasize that often for the sake of tidiness, we might kind of we're often told it looks neat to kind of deadhead our flowers, but these seed heads can potentially provide sources of food kind of well into the winter for migratory birds arriving in the fall and birds that are going to arrive to spend the winter with us. The bird on the right here is a pine siskin, and it's feeding on gray-headed coneflower seed heads. And once every few years, we get massive numbers of pine siskins coming down to Georgia that coincide with kind of food shortages of kind of low cone crops in their breeding areas. So they come down to Georgia in their hundreds, and they're pretty hungry. So this one day I looked out the window and there's about 50 pine siskins in my yard, and they were all over these seed heads. Um, these seed heads have value through the winter. I think they provide a bit of winter visual interest. Sometimes insects will overwinter in the seed heads as well that can be feeding our insectivorous birds. So, consider leaving at least some of the seed heads on your flowers after they've gone to seed, and they'll support birds through the winter.
Fantastic. Um, Switch over to everyone's favorite. You guys both want to highlight any hummingbird plants, and Bob, feel free to chime in with any if you have any other seed plants that you want to highlight. But yeah, I guess these photos are from your yard, Richard. You want to talk about what we're seeing?
Sure, I'll start off with a couple of things that grow well in my yard. So, ruby-throated hummingbirds are with us from March through October, and they love to feed on these red flowers with long tubular structures that they've co-evolved with. And the picture on the right, you can see that this hummingbird's got like a little yellow streak on its head. That's not a mohawk. That's actually pollen that's been deposited while it feeds on those flowers. And so it's a mutualistic relationship. Red tubular flowers are generally hummingbird pollinated. And so what I like to think about is providing a variety of those plants through the season. So kind of early plants that support hummingbirds would include red columbine. And then in the middle of summer, I really like sort of scarlet bee balm. At this time of year, my cardinal flowers have just about finished flowering, but I have a coral honeysuckle, a native honeysuckle that produces some flowers, throughout the season that hummingbirds are with us. Yeah, Bob, do you have any kind of additional species that you like to encourage hummingbirds?
Yeah, I think you touched on them. Same, the only other thing that I throw in there is we do have nice stands of jewelweed, which the hummingbirds love this time of year. It's a fall flowering plant, and the little orange yellow flowers are fantastic producers of nectar. The other interesting thing about jewelweed, and we found this out through observation, was that apparently rose-breasted grosbeaks love to get into the jewelweed, and they'll get the seed pods and start munching down on all the seed pods. So whenever we see little movement in the base of the jewelweed, it's usually a rose-breasted grosbeak that pops his head up, and he's been in there munching on the little flower buds. And that helps, of course, also spread the seeds, which may be the reason that we have so much jewelweed in the yard right now. But cardinal flower, bee balm, both excellent producers of nectar for hummingbirds in our yard. We do provide some hummingbird feeders as well, but for the most part, that jewelweed seems to be really the best plant this time of year for us.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I have a huge stand of jewelweed at a park near my house, and I had like I want to say at least 30 hummingbirds all flying around that the past 2 weeks, like at one time. It's like an absolute hummingbird haven. There's so many of them. So, and jewelweed has super cool exploding seed pods, which is a really fun side note. But yeah, some great nectar producing hummingbird plants. And I always like to highlight, um, the good thing about these plants is if aren't, a lot of people put a hummingbird feeder up and then leave it at that. But these plants are not only providing nectar, but also a place for a lot of insects. And hummingbirds do feed their young insects. And so having something that can provide that insect resource is going to allow hummingbirds to have more success nesting in your yard or near you. And so that's really kind of delves into the whole idea of understanding ecology and providing for birds in a more multi-dimensional way. So really cool stuff there. Let's see, what else do we have? All right, fruit. Fruit is important both in the spring and the fall. But I think both of you have red mulberry growing in your yard. So yeah, what kind of stuff you guys want to share about red mulberry?
Go ahead, Richard.
Um, oh, just that I love it. So it produces fruit in the spring. Like here in Athens, pretty late spring, so it's usually kind of like early to mid-May that it's really producing fruit, and that is coinciding with some of the later spring migrants for me. So I will see things like scarlet and summer tanager, cedar waxwings that don't breed in Athens, breed a little further north in Georgia, are often lingering like pretty late here to chow down on those. So while it's fruiting, it's a real draw. And even though I kind of live in the middle of town, it will sometimes draw in species I don't usually see in the middle of town, but outside of town, like yellow-breasted chat, for example.
I'll also add that mulberry is fantastic. The other one in our yard that is very good producing food, especially in that late spring, early summertime, is the service berries. We have several large serviceberry trees, and as Richard said, the cedar waxwings will devour the fruit on that for as long as it'll last, and they really do enjoy it. We also get the bluebirds that are nesting that'll come in and feed on the service berries. And of course, chokecherry. That's the other one that we have growing in the backyard that really gets a lot of activity from both warblers, vireos, thrushes, etc. I'll throw a plug in for pokeweed now too, because this is the time of year that the pokeweed plants are all producing lots of berries, and it's a fantastic plant. Thrushes go to town on it in our yard, and Swainson thrush, veery, wood thrush, gray cheek thrush. They'll all hit the pokeweed and spend as much time as they can till all those berries are gone. And it's a great plant. Most people think of it as a weed, but we love it in the yard.
Yeah. And
Fantastic. Yeah,
I've
let's
seen,
transition to some more fall fruit.
yeah, I'll echo
Richard?
buckwheat, and I think that like warblers like to forage for like sawfly larvae and other insects on the pokeweed too. Um, I think one of my like absolute favorite fall uh, fruiting plants is the devil's walking stick, Aurelia spinosa. So it produces these lovely kind of like shocking pink kind of clusters of berries with like little dark berries on the end. And because they're so small, I see kind of like birds of different sizes feeding on these. So anything from kind of magnolia warblers up to sort of much larger birds like thrushes and grosbeaks. And one other cool thing about Devil's Walking Stick is that it flowers, produces lovely showy white flowers, look a bit like elderberry flowers or Queen Anne's lace, kind of in mid to late July at a time when not a lot of other native plants are flowering. So it's also a great resource for like, I see a lot of eastern tiger swallowtails and native bees and wasps all over those flowers a little earlier in the summer. Then it switches to being really productive to for for birds. So I have a little mixed thicket of sort of pokeweed, beautyberry, and devil's walking stick that's been very productive for some birds that Bob would really love to see, like that Philadelphia vireo on the right.
Yeah, I thought you were going to mention that. Thank you, buddy.
Yeah, another great fall fruiting plant that I'll mention is spice bush. If you have a shaded yard, a lot of folks struggle to figure out what they can plant and shade, and spice bush does pretty well. It'll produce a little more fruit if it gets at least a little bit of sun, but it is a nice fall fruit that's high in fat, perfect for what the birds need this time of year. All right, let's talk about some herbaceous plants. A lot of these are flowering right now. Yeah, you guys want to highlight some of these sunflowers and asters that are fantastic?
Yeah. You want to go first, Bob?
Well, these are pictures from your yard, and honestly, my fall flowering plants are not as good as yours. I really need to do some work in this area. So let's hear what you got to say here, buddy.
Okay, yeah. So Doug Tallamy, who's a kind of popular science writer and has done a lot of work on kind of the importance of backyards as wildlife habitat, has done studies on different kinds of plants and the diversity of caterpillars they support. And so there are actually some plants that he considers to be kind of like superfoods. If we're thinking about these caterpillars as prey for insect-eating warblers. Goldenrods, any of the asters or sunflowers, a lot of which are flowering right now and will flower all the way into October, support a kind of unusually high diversity of caterpillars. And if we think much bigger, the same could be said of things like oaks and willows and cherries among native trees. So there are certain plant groups. If you Google kind of like plant superfoods for birds, you'll find a list of these. But yeah, I love the goldenrods and the asters, and I see like a lot of the birds that like to forage at lower levels. So things like Tennessee warblers or prairie warblers, or if I'm very lucky, something like a Nashville warbler, often show up in those like goldenrod and sunflower thickets rather than up in the canopy. I'd also say that monarch butterflies, when they're migrating through, absolutely love to nectar on sunflower and asters too.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Highlighting, having some herbaceous, a thicket, it is really important if you want to see some of these birds, coming down lower. Especially, we're going to get into the water feature thing, but especially if you don't have a water feature, if you don't have thick herbaceous plants in certain parts of your yard, it's going to be really difficult to get some of these birds coming down to out of the canopy to get good observations of them. I want to transition to talk a little bit about some of the cool wildlife that we're seeing in addition to the birds. So the beauty of building a wildlife sanctuary is that, yeah, it's not just the birds, but there's so many cool things to learn. And having a classroom in your backyard is the best thing to do. Yeah, Richard, you want to kick it off with kind of highlighting some of the stuff you've learned or cool observations you've had from a insect perspective?
Yeah, so I've always been a birder through and through. And then in 2020, a lot of us ended up stuck at home, not with many places to go. And I thought, I should really branch out and think about non-birds. So I started paying attention to things in my yard. And I have to confess I'm not very proficient at insect identification. So a lot of the time I was just trying to sort of like get good photographs of these insects and then upload them to a site like iNaturalist, where machine learning and sort of expert opinion will help you get there. So, for example, while I knew my monarch caterpillars that love to feed on milkweeds on the left, I had no idea what the caterpillar on the right was that looked like the caterpillar you see on that children's book, The Very Hungry Caterpillar. So I was absolutely delighted when it pupated and turned into a long-tailed skipper, a really like beautiful late summer butterfly. Um, I guess when I'm thinking about sort of plants for gardening, um, you know, I certainly don't want to like diss non-native plants. Like there's a place for them. They're pretty. As Bob said, plants like lantana actually support a lot of insects looking for nectar. Um, but some plants are better than others because they serve multiple uses. So a lot of these plants are both nectar resources for a variety of pollinators, but also there are often very highly specialized relationships between insect herbivores and the plants they feed on. So, milkweeds have evolved these defenses against a lot of things that try to eat them, but monarchs actually use those toxins as chemical weapons to defend themselves against predation. And so it's been really super fun to learn. I didn't know the associations between all of these different sort of caterpillar species and the preferential host plants. And I've often found that out just by following the adult butterflies. If they're not sort of nectaring, but they're kind of flying around purposefully in a spot and landing on a plant, that's when you notice that, it's a female and she dips her abdomen underneath her body and deposits an egg. So it's been really fun to learn about all these kind of unique associations between native plants and the caterpillars they support.
Absolutely. And yeah, what about iNaturalist and yeah, kind of beyond those? iNaturalist is really fun, and if folks aren't familiar, it's I think a great resource and fun way to start to deepen your knowledge and understanding of what's happening in your backyard. It's similar to eBird, if you're familiar with eBird, in terms of they're both citizen science platforms that allow you to submit observations and create accounts and track your observations. And iNaturalist allows you to identify not only birds, but insects and plants and fungi. And so it can be really fun to explore. Um, but yeah, these are some stats from your yard, Richard. Any of these stand out to you as particularly exciting?
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess what blew me away was the diversity of things that are coming to this little urban yard. I'm not surrounded by like continuous native habitat. And it's just one of those things that the more you look and the greater the diversity of native plants you have, um, the more things you're going to discover. And this is, I'm sure, just the tip of the iceberg of the species there. So I guess, I mean, it's hard to name sort of particular highlights, but there's been a couple of like bumblebee species, like the Southern Plains bumblebee, that have shown up nectaring on my ironweed, where I put them into iNaturalist. I didn't know what species they were. it came back as Southern Plains bumblebee. And then like a few weeks later, Georgia Department of Natural Resources like contacted me to say like, oh, we just wanted to confirm that you saw this in your yard because it's a species that's up for consideration as being listed as federally endangered because a lot of these pollinators have lost habitat. So it kind of really blew my mind that my little urban patch was sort of attracting not just some cool birds, but some insects and some threatened ones at that. So even a small amount of habitat in a very urban area can go a long way to supporting these animals.
Absolutely. And what about other wildlife, such as mammals or reptiles, amphibians? Um, Bob, I'm going to kick it over to you. Have you had any kind of interesting wildlife observations outside of insects and birds?
Well, yeah. The more developed our backyard got, the more we started to see mammals showing up at night. Obviously, we have a good number of raccoons and possums in the area, and they always find their way into the yard in the evening. Just like most suburban yards, there's a lot of deer around, which can be good and bad. They tend to eat a lot of our native plants, but that's okay. We're in their area. And then now recently, there's been a family of foxes that have come out and have been coming through the yard at night, which is always really cool to see too. We haven't seen those in the first 15, 20 years we were here, and now they seem to be here almost on a nightly basis, which is very nice. Beyond that, amphibian wise, because we have that little pond back there, we do have a good assortment of frogs that we see in the yard that have been around. I got to get better as Richard is at putting some of this stuff into iNaturalist, because you just realize that there's a lot of things that we've cited here that probably would be beneficial to get recorded somewhere. So thanks for that, Richard. I hadn't really thought about doing all of that, but that makes sense. So that's pretty much it for the mammals, I think.
Awesome. What about you, Richard? Are there any other wildlife observations that you find quite notable from your yard?
Yeah, I think the part. So yeah, I don't think I have any sort of particularly unexpected mammals, but amphibians. So I'm up on a hill, kind of surrounded by roads. So it's probably like a couple of city blocks to the nearest stream, and at least a kind of half a mile, three-quarter of a mile to a pond that's anything like what Bob's got out the back. But amphibians have found my pond. So I have I always get this wrong. Do I have two-lined salamanders, Gabe, or is it three-lined?
Yeah, you have two-line salamanders.
Yeah.
You definitely could have three-lined, but I think two-lined are more
Uh,
common, and that's what we've
yeah.
identified in your space.
Yeah, so I've got two-lined salamanders, and it was really cool. I had a reptile, an amphibian enthusiast come over, and he lifted some rocks in my stream, and we found like a female sort of guarding like a cluster of eggs, and it was so cool to see the baby salamander eggs, which is something I'd never seen before. And then things like leopard frogs, green frogs, occasionally a bullfrog finds the pond. And I just love the sound of the tree frogs after a thunderstorm. So we have gray tree frogs. And in recent years, we didn't have these at the start, but increasingly we're hearing squirrel tree frogs in the neighborhood moving into town as well. So
Very
yeah.
neat. Very neat.
Cool.
All right, I'm gonna switch back to our presentation here, and I'm gonna go through these next couple slides relatively quickly because I want to save some time for the meat and potatoes of a lot of the birds that are making this kind of back and forth between Richard and Bob. What the birds that have fueled a lot of that dialogue. But I really wanted to just mention and emphasize native plants really make the difference when it comes to building wildlife habitat that is robust and can support a great diversity of wildlife. Richard mentioned Doug Tallamy, that's the gentleman in the bottom right-hand corner, an entomologist that's written some great books outlining the importance of native plants for birds and the insect connection. And there's tons of different ways to get native plants. Naturally, things will pop up in your time in your yard, so you can just pay attention to the volunteers and use things like iNaturalist to help you identify them. There's some great native plant nurseries. Georgia Native Plant Society and other places do plant rescues at times. Um, and then it's also important to make sure that you're paying attention to those non-native and invasive plants. Both Richard and Bob mentioned that a huge part of getting started was removing those plants, and it's a constant, ongoing management practice to stay on top of those plants to minimize the food that's not great for our native insects, right? They can't use these non-native plants in the same way that they can native plants. And so if you need some recommendations, you can take a screenshot of this slide, or you can go to our sanctuary page and check out our resources there. Richard mentioned some of the home run hitting plants for birds. And these perennials and trees and shrubs listed here are the ones that are great for our caterpillars, and those are what are really fueling birds and bird reproduction. We also have a story map on our resource page on our sanctuary, on the sanctuary page on our website that shows native plant alternatives to a lot of non-native plants. So if you're just getting started, that's a good place to look for recommendations. And then once again, there's a lot of great native plant nurseries. And on the left, you can see a plant rescue we went on and filled up our truck for the Birds Georgia Habitat team with a bunch of native plants, and then there's some plants from one of the great native nurseries called Beach Hollow. And so now let's talk about this water feature. I know we had a question in the chat about water feature, and so we're gonna start to outline the water feature and both Richard and Bob's and go from there. So I think what I might do is I'm gonna see if I can play this video from Richard's yard. And then Richard, you can kind of talk about um, this. Let me just pull it up here and we'll give it a go, and hopefully everybody will be able to see this. All right.
Yeah. So I guess while Gabe's getting that set up, this is a video I took a couple of falls ago, and I took it basically over the course of 2 days in mid-October. And our part of Georgia is pretty dry at that time of year. We don't get much rain. So water is a really limiting resource on the landscape. So it really is drawing migratory birds. And so even though our fall warblers might be a bit duller than our spring birds, there's a lot more of them because they're all the young of the year. And so the fall, especially these dry kind of mid-October periods, tend to be when I see these little warbler parties. So not just seeing one bird at a time come down, but seeing lots of different mixed species assemblages. So we've got Cape May warblers in here, that streaky bird. We got a Tennessee warbler, the sort of yellow-breasted bird in the front there. And here we can see a Blackburnian warbler and another Tennessee warbler kind of stepping into the frame. There's a yellow-throated warbler being upstaged by one of our resident birds, like an eastern bluebird here. There's a young American redstart kind of doing its flash dance, flashing its tail feathers. But yeah, essentially, a lot of these birds are spending a lot of time up in the canopy, but no matter where these birds like to forage or what they feed on, collectively, water's really important for them. They use it for feather maintenance, for bathing, and for drinking. And even shy species like this yellow-throated vireo will come down. I haven't yet seen a real roseate spoonbill, so I've just got a fake one in the picture there. But yeah. By mid-October, we're getting both resident species like this towhee and Swainson's thrush, the last of the grey catbirds before they leave the Athens area as such. But and a Baltimore oriole being upstaged by an annoying cloud of Tennessee warblers.
Whoa,
So
wow. That was that was amazing, Richard. That was such a good video. Oh man. Um yeah,
I'll
Show
just do
off.
the first punch.
He's
thanks for
just
putting
showing
that
off.
together.
That's all there is.
That was special. Let me go ahead and um, bring back up our other slideshow here. And yeah, so you've had how many species use your water feature, Richard?
Oh, well, you're seeing it right here on the screen. 112 as of last week because I got a brand new species, a northern water thrush, which I think everybody was shocked was long overdue. So I've had less expected species than that. But yeah, what I love is that my little pond is getting anything from tiny birds like this wintering rufous hummingbird through to this gigantic great blue heron that here has got like a bulging neck. So it had probably just eaten something. And I wonder if it was a hapless cardinal or whether it got one of my frogs in the stream. But it's really incredible the diversity you see.
Wow. Yeah, that truly is amazing. And I can attest, I've had the pleasure of going to both Richard and Bob's yards, and it is really amazing to watch some of these migrants, especially the warblers that are up in the canopy, and you can actually observe them take note of the water below and slowly make their way down to the water feature, and that's why it's so important to have layers of native vegetation, having things like vines, and different understory plants, mid-story plants, canopy plants, because it allows these birds to comfortably make their way down to this water feature. And I can say, the same thing for Bob's yard. He has that layer which really allows these birds to be comfortable in coming down to these really cool water features. Yeah. Did
Ooh.
someone say water feature? Well, Bob, you want to take it away and talk a little bit about your water feature and kind of, yeah, you mentioned how it kind of came to be. You repurposed that path, but it's brought in some pretty amazing birds, hasn't it?
Well, yeah, 112 is not bad, Richard, but I think we're up to 128. So
Whew.
keep it up, all right? The yeah, yeah. I mean, as you said, Gabe. I mean, it's incredible. The beauty of this is we get to see these birds up close and for a little longer than just flitting through the treetops or up in the canopy, right? They're coming down. They're using the water. They're bathing. They're drinking. It really is an incredible thing. In our case, unlike Richard, I think, who probably had someone come and install his water feature for him. I think, I don't think, as a matter of fact, I'm not sure you can actually count those birds since he didn't put that in himself. But be that the case may it be, we started ours with that little pass like you talked about. And when we put it in, it really did take off. I mean, didn't take long at all. You can see some of these birds here: rose-breasted grosbeak, yellow warbler. We've had about a dozen or 2 dozen northern water thrushes. I don't know why Richard couldn't get one before this. Baltimore oriole, scarlet tanager. That's a bay-breasted warbler, a beautiful male in the springtime. And this is one of my most recent ones. This yellow-billed cuckoo that came down to bathe. We've had them in the yard a dozen times, but they never make it down to the stream to bathe. This one, like you said, Gabe, kind of worked its way down from the canopy, down into the mid-story, got over the stream, sat there for a while, and then he dropped into the stream and continued to bathe, and it was really, really cool to watch that. So, and I think up to this point in time, we've had, I want to say, 32 species of warblers that have come into the stream at some point in time, spring, fall, winter. It's been amazing to be able to catch them and see them in this kind of environment.
Wow.
So,
Yeah, I'm curious. Well, actually, I'll save that question for the end. Um,
yeah.
let's keep it rolling. Here is a short video from Bob's water feature, just kind of highlighting the cascading waterfall from the top of his yard downhill. So I think the sound of the
Hey, Gabe,
water. Yep.
There you go. I was just about to say the same thing. I think that because the birds are hearing the sound of that water flowing, it's attracting them. Mostly the backyard birds, the cardinals, the tanner, they're all going to be coming in because they hear the water. And then that attracts the other migrants that might be in the canopy to come down and check it out. So yeah, you were going to say the same thing, I think.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah, that's something I've noticed and always thought about. And so that's even if you don't have a lot of space to put in a big water feature, getting something that has the sound of running water, and just a little bit of a drip or movement of water, I think can make a big impact. But I'm gonna throw it over to Richard to explain this little slide he put together, and we're gonna start talking about some of the warblers that have been really exciting to see. Yeah. Richard, you want to explain this one?
Yeah,
Yeah,
this is just
so
cool.
as I mentioned, Bob and I have known each other a long time, and we often meet up in remote parts of Georgia when a strange bird came up. And I often wonder what Bob's kind of thinking about when I show up. And this is our little group photo. We were all celebrating seeing Georgia's first ever rock wren up in the mountains, and I was just thrilled to be seeing this rock wren. And Bob's smile was like, didn't look quite as broad or sincere, and I couldn't help but wonder whether he was dreaming about the Connecticut warbler that showed up at my pond one May.
Yeah, so can you tell us about the warblers that have visited your yard and your
Yeah,
pond?
well, it looks like I'm lagging Bob again here because I have only seen 31 warbler species at my pond of a total of 32 warblers that I've recorded in the yard. And this is a little montage of all of these species taken at or around my pond. And you'll see in the bottom right corner, there's a sad little white square there. That's a spectrogram, a visualization of a sound recording I made of a cerulean warbler, because the one and only time a cerulean warbler came to my yard, it sang from up in the canopy, but it never came down to my water feature, and I'm a little bit salty about that.
Wow, well, let's
What?
kick it over to Bob and see if he has anything to say about that.
What? You never had cerulean? Oh, come on, dude. We've been pretty lucky. We have had many cerulean sightings come down into the stream, and every time I get one, I just have to share it with my buddy Richard. Just because I know he loves that bird so much, and he wants to see them. He wants to see them very badly. He wants to see them in his yard, and if you believe him, he did have one singing, and I'm sure he did.
Yeah, I think that's cool, kind of highlighting maybe some of the influence of where you guys live in the state. Ceruleans maybe migrate in heavier numbers on the western part of Georgia than the eastern part of Georgia, which could be maybe the reason, Bob, you've had more ceruleans, or maybe your just yard is that much better. Who knows?
Well, I do want to say, this, and I think a lot of people understand this. Cerulean warblers have been having a real hard time. We've birded over on this side of town, for 30 years. We used to go to Kennesaw in the spring and fall, and it was easy to get 15 or 20 cerulean warblers in the spring on a good spring morning. Of course, now if we get one or two, it's a great day. So that's one bird that really, really is in trouble. So anything we can do to help, whether it's just providing it a little bath or water or something, we feel pretty good about trying to help them. And I think a couple other ones, Richard, that you may want to see. This Prothonotary warbler and this golden wing warbler. We've had a couple of golden wings. We've had Prothonotaries. Of course, I think part of the advantage we have is that little pond there. I think it attracts, a little bit more likely to get things like northern water thrush, Prothonotary warbler, any of those birds that are kind of more marsh-like birds. So, but it's nice to see them in the yard.
I don't think they should really count if they were using the big pond and just a little
They did
pond.
come down to the little pond. This golden wing was actually in one of those bird bats you talked about before we had the big pond. So you may tell me I can't include it, but I think we have had one come into the stream.
But that's a good point. Bob and I both lucky that we've got slightly fancy stream setups, but one day my stream broke. So I just put a little water dish in the stream while I was getting the pump repaired. And my one and only yard record of Kentucky warbler came and just bathed in this little dish of still water. Um, my neighbors across the way from me are stealing birds from my yard right now. They've just laid some sod in their front yard and they're using these high sprinklers to water it in. And the American redstarts are just waiting in the tree branches and just like flapping their wings as the sprinkler comes by. So any water is attractive. It doesn't have to be as elaborate as something that like Bob and I have done. But yeah, you know,
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's a really good point. Um, I want to yeah, continue moving us along and also mention that we have about 20, a little over 20 minutes left, but right around there. So I know we have a lot of good stuff to get through still. So let's try and make sure we try and cover all of this so that maybe we have time for a couple questions at the end. Um, I'm gonna skip on to winter surprises. I know you both have had some cool, yeah, winter birds, especially thinking about sparrows. I think these photos are from your yard, Richard.
Yeah. So, I live in town and my yard's sort of fairly woodsy. It's got oak cover. And these are birds I would normally think of as more open country grassland birds. But again, if you've got a mix of like native grasses and wildflowers producing seeds, these birds will find them. So yeah, white-crowned sparrow and Savannah sparrow, they're not super rare in the state of Georgia or anything, but they weren't birds I was necessarily expecting to find in my yard. Do you have these ones, Bob?
Oh,
We so actually, yes, we did get white crowned sparrow one time, just like you. And like you said, it was feeding on these dead pokeweed stems that had some seeds in it. That was a nice surprise. And a very secretive bird that's really hard to see sometimes, especially if you're looking for them. Lincoln sparrow in our state. Typically, they're very skulky. It's hard to find them. This bird actually showed up in the spring. It was singing in the backyard, and it spent a day here just kind of using the backyard stream and picking at some seeds and things. That was kind of a cool. That was a cool find. We've actually had them twice.
how many have you had, Richard? Lincoln sparrow.
Zero, zero Lincoln sparrow. But I do get swamp sparrows from time to time, so I'm holding out hope. Maybe this will be the fall.
Bob, have you had Savannah?
We've had savanna, we've had swamp, we've had pretty much vesper. We've been pretty lucky. We've had quite a few sparrows come through. We used to be surrounded by farmyards, before this was all developed. So a lot of those birds we saw early on. We've actually had Bob White in the yard, but
Wow.
it's been a long time.
Hmm. All right, Richard, let's jump into winter hummingbirds.
Yeah, so increasingly we're finding in the southeastern US this weird phenomenon of kind of western breeding hummingbird species. Instead of going due south to Central and South America, a lot of them are moving to the southeast. And with our generally warmer winters, with plants that are flowering well into the winter if there's not a hard frost, and of course, birders being more aware of this phenomenon and leaving their hummingbird feeders out through the winter, we're starting to see these species. And yeah, my winter hummers were a long time coming. I tried leaving out feeders in winter without much success. And then one winter I got a 2-for-1. So this young male black-chinned hummingbird that I called Archie showed up and was joined shortly after that by this Rufus hummingbird. And I'd like to emphasize that, they certainly came for the bird feeders, but they stayed for the native plants. So these birds were often foraging for insects around dead stems of these plants, and often using those as perches and habitat to shelter from the harsher weather. So they were still benefiting from native plants.
Mm-hmm.
I'll have to say that black-chin hummingbird Archie was my lifer black-chin hummingbird. So thank you very much for that, Richard. But what about you, Bob? Do you have any winter hummingbirds?
Yes, we did. Matter of fact, one of the first, only I think maybe the second or third report of calliope hummingbird was in our yard. This little female hummingbird came in. We've actually had calliope twice. We had it 1 year, and then 2 years later we had another come. We knew it wasn't the same one because it wasn't banded. So that was very, very cool. A couple of calliopes. We've had rufus a couple of times. We believe we had a black chin, but it was a winter bird that didn't stick around and wasn't banded. So I can't tell you for sure we had black chinned. But but like Richard said, you know, they came for the feeders, but there was plenty of food in the yard. There was a lot of flowering plants still that winter. It was a good winter. It was a warmer winter, so we had some stuff still blooming, and the calliopes seemed pretty happy. They'd stay through April, so it was kind of cool.
Very neat. Now, I'll say it really helps your yard list if you're a really good birder, and both Bob and Richard are fantastic birders. And so they've done, I think, maximized in many ways the different ways to try and observe birds from their yard. And one of those that sometimes people forget about is just keeping your eyes to the sky for flyovers. So, really briefly, Richard and Bob, you want to highlight some of the cool flyovers that you probably wouldn't have gotten on your yard list if you haven't been watching the sky.
Yeah, well, mine are photographed right here. So birds that wouldn't in any way be attracted to my yard. After a storm, a flock of northern shoveler flew over. I've had a couple of peregrines now. The first one was spotted by my neighbor James Neves. Thanks to James, I was able to run out to the street to see it. And then I had another one a few weeks later. And I've had American herring gull on two separate occasions, more than I've had ring-billed gull. And I also like to go out and listen for birds at night. So I've had some interesting nocturnal flight calls, things like black-billed cuckoo, which I haven't seen during the day yet. And sometimes being out right at dawn is a good time to listen for flyovers. So I've had American pipits multiple times. So another open grassland species, but during migration in November.
Very neat. What about you, Bob?
Yeah, I don't have pictures of this, but we have had some great flyovers. We've had flocks of snow geese go over in the spring and fall. We've had probably the best was a flock of sandhill cranes with a whooping crane in it. It was very cool to see that. Ran in to get
Wow.
the camera, but of course, by the time I got back, they were out of sight. We don't see Mississippi kite in this area very often. So a Mississippi kite flyover is a good bird for us. We've had that. And as Richard said, Deb especially is into nocturnal calls. So we've done quite a bit of nocturnal thrush counts just sitting out in the front yard. And we've heard, you know, numerous species of thrush, you know, Swainson's great-cheeked veery. We've had bobolink, we've had pipit. I mean, it's amazing what you can hear coming over, you know, especially pre-dawn, you know, that 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning kind of time when things are starting to come down. It's just incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really neat. That really allows you to tap into a whole different part of birding and a fun way to start to add some species to your yard list. Now, I want to start diving into some of the more uncommon species that are sometimes even difficult to find in other places around town. And so, you know, things that have showed up in both your yards or one of your yards and not the other through migration. And so I think these are from your yard. Richard, you want to briefly outline these observations?
Yeah, birders are curious people, right? So have all these beautiful multicolored warblers up in the yard. And what gets me like standing up and like hooping with excitement, it's like the grayest birds you can imagine. Um, but yeah, Connecticut warbler is a bird that migrates through Georgia every year, but they're incredibly difficult to see because they're really skulking birds. So my eyes almost popped out of my skull when I kind of looked down at the pond and saw this bird kind of like walking around with this big white eye ring. And then also attracted by that devil's walking stick was this warbling vireo that kind of landed at the pond. And that's not a very common Athens bird. At this time, I think it was like the something like the fifth ever recorded in Athens. And it's looking pretty angry there because it was having its perch usurped by a house finch that's just off frame. And then, the Empidonax flycatchers are notorious among birders as being really difficult to identify. I noticed Bob posted a picture of an Empid this week that he didn't even try to identify. But this little tiny bird that was very hyperactive and bobbing its tail, pretty grey, is very sort of characteristic of least flycatcher. And I was really excited to see this bird because it came into the ponds to bathe, and like other flycatchers, they don't just sort of sit in the water and splash around. They perch above the pond and they dive bomb it with their bellies, go back to their perch and like flutter their wings. So I thought that was a really neat behavior of a bird that I don't get to see all that often in Athens.
Very cool. All right, Bob, what about you?
I tell you what, I'm dying over that Connecticut warbler, man. I am dying. But we've had a couple of cool birds. So this picture is of an American woodcock, which they're not easy to find even in migration. You have to really try to look for them. Just happened to be sitting, drinking coffee, looking out the window one morning and saw the leaves rustling. Got the binoculars on it, and this little woodcock was doing its little shuffle dance like they do. And it was incredible. So that was very cool. And then we've had a couple of marsh wrens show up and be in the stream. I know Richard is kind of dying over that one. He'll get them eventually. But that little marsh wren and another marsh wren just last year were our first two marsh wrens in the yard. So that's kind of cool too. They're very, those are birds that typically will spend more time in fields and flooded fields and marshes, obviously, than they would in a normal backyard, suburban backyard. So.
Yeah, very, very cool observations. And that, yeah, just goes to show during migration, things, are moving across the landscape and they have to use whatever habitat they can find at times so that, your yard played an important role in supporting that bird, even if it was just for a short period of time. That's really neat. All right, now some of the rare observations you've had, Richard. What was this story with the Bell's vireo?
Oh boy, it was a hot, sultry Georgia afternoon in August. There wasn't much going on in the yard at all, and I saw what I thought was an immature white-eyed vireo kind of moving around in the yard, but something just seemed a little bit off, and I kind of looked at it through my binoculars, and I looked again, and it's like, I think this is a Bell's vireo, which is a pretty rare bird for Georgia. At the time, it was around the fifth to be recorded ever in the state, although we've had a sort of recent flurry of more recent records. And I was really excited to see this bird. So, I kind of sounded the alarm, got the bird news out on Facebook, on eBird, and all the other places. And by the end of the day, multiple local birders had seen it. And over its 9-day stay, it was seen by about 50 people. And it was really cool because, again, it was eating beauty berries, devil's walking stick berries, finding lots of caterpillars in the yard. So it seemed to be pretty happy there.
Yeah, that's awesome. Such an incredible sighting and awesome you got to share it with so many people. But I don't think it takes the prize as your rarest bird. Is that
Oh
right?
no. Oh no, indeed. Yeah, I had a celebrity visitor on the weekend of the Great Backyard Bird Count, no less. I was sitting in my screen porch with a former student who was visiting town, and I have a lot of Baltimore Orioles that overwinter in the yard. And I was talking about how I was trying to turn up a rarer species like a Bullock's Oriole that sometimes shows up. And I said, I get these really weird looking Orioles in the yard. And in flies this bird. I say, take that bird. Does that look like a Baltimore Oriole to you? And we both went silent and said, like, no, it really doesn't look like a Baltimore Oriole. And it turns out that it was, in fact, a hooded Oriole, which is the second ever record for Georgia, and the only other record was seen a year prior and seen by just one observer and never refound. So I knew this was going to cause major panic among the Georgia birders. But they needn't have, because this bird ended up staying around for 5 whole weeks. And over that time period, at least 130 people saw it. Sadly, Gabe was 1 day late and showed up 1 day after it left, and I'm very
Uh,
sorry about that.
Oh no.
yeah, pretty incredible. Pretty incredible. The 1 day too late, but yeah, that's such an incredible sighting. That's awesome. And once again, so fantastic that you were able to share it with so many people. Yeah, I'm pretty certain in saying, Bob, you went and got to see maybe both of those birds.
I did. I made several trips to Athens to visit Richard's wonderful yard, and was lucky enough to see both of them. So that was very nice. I got to give him
Awesome.
credit for those two.
But you didn't bring
Yeah.
me cerulean.
Yeah.
Next time.
All right. I think speaking of Georgia birders and birding, Richard, do you want to explain this one?
Well, I was told it was a battle, so I was like, Bob loves to go out on pelagic trips, so offshore trips looking for seabirds in Georgia, and these pelagics often have moments of quiet contemplation where we're not seeing much. But here we are at the start of a day. We'd left at midnight to go get out as far to sea as we could, and we're all kind of grinning with anticipation, except for Bob, who's looking a bit sort of deeply reflective. And again, I wonder, is he just jealous of my birds again?
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
that's exactly what I was thinking.
Richard, I know you're a doctor, but I heard you were thinking maybe after seeing Bob somewhat recently, you thought maybe he had VBS. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm not a medical doctor, but he was showing all the symptoms of VBS, or what I call kind of vireo blindness syndrome. Um, so, Bob spends a lot of time looking forlorn on these pelagics, lying down, letting all the young birders find the birds for him. And again, I wonder what's going through his mind. And I think it's just the fact that, in spite of having this amazing habitat and amazing pond, he just can't seem to get these little vireos down to that. So I think I have 3 vireo species that Bob has never seen in his yard.
Yeah,
See
speaking
if
of
you can read my
Vireos.
mind now.
So, who's got the birdiest backyard? I mean, Bob has definitely seen more species than I have, but you know, I'm catching up on him, and I think it was particularly satisfying when the warbling vireo, now eastern warbling vireo, showed up in the yard, because rather like Thanos in the Age of Ultron collecting his Infinity Stones, I now have all of the Georgia vireo,
Yeah, I think you're the only one in the state that can say that.
and they all came to the
Yeah.
pond as well, so that's a high dense vireo density per square foot there.
All right, so the last couple slides, yeah, let's take a step back and reflect on things, yeah, at large. So, I mean, um Bob does have the birdiest yard in terms of species numbers, and you're certainly snapping at his heels. What do you guys? I don't know. He's taking a step back and reflecting on your journeys and these numbers. Um, yeah, what kinds of things do you guys have to say?
Well, numbers are great, right? We've been in this yard a lot longer than Richard has, obviously. I probably have a couple of duck species that Richard will never get, only because they've shown up on the pond, and so that's all good. That's all well and good. But the important thing is, the number of species that we're able to provide food, shelter, water for on an annual basis. That's what's really important. We can, this time of year, as the warblers start to come through, we've had a lot of people come over to the yard because we'll provide, and we'll put some grapes and some watermelon out, some fruit for the birds that like that. And there could be 30 or 40 Tennessee warblers in the yard feeding on, watermelon and grape, just to, help them along the way. And with that comes a whole bunch of other species, of course. But I think it's just important that, we're providing that shelter for them, and that gives them a little bit of a helping hand. These birds have a long way to go to their wintering grounds, and it just makes us, feel like we're at least doing a little something, as you said, Gabe, to give back.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I know
fantastic.
Richard's only I know Richard's only in it for the numbers, but that's how I feel.
There we go. No, I totally echo Bob. We do all sorts of things to cook the books, like look at flyover birds and listen for nocturnal flight counts and things. But it just blows my mind that, like, such a small area, neither Bob or I have huge yards, and such small areas can attract a real diversity of birds that are actively using the space to forage and to bathe. And, it helps me feel connected to the wider universe. Every time I see like a gray-cheeked thrush or a blackpoll warbler, I think, where in South America did you winter? Like, where are you going? Alaska, Newfoundland? It totally boggles my mind. And as Gabe said at the very start, some of these birds are in trouble. So if we can do any little thing to help their journeys be a little bit easier by creating a little bit of habitat in our backyard, I think that's something really powerful that we can do. We enjoy it, but we're also really helping these birds.
Yeah, very well said. And I can't say enough, yeah, how much I think your efforts in your yards not only are helping those birds, but also inspiring other birders to take action. And yeah, your yards are also great birder habitat. I think this is a fantastic example of that. And so, yeah, thank you both for sharing and being open with your yards and allowing them to be tools to allow birders and people to see birds they've never seen before and get observations in the state that they might not have had before and just bring people together. It's really such a wonderful thing. Um, so yeah, I guess we're at 7:30 right now. So I just to respect people's time, I want to um, do a final vote to let people vote on whose backyard they think is the birdiest. I don't think there's any right answer. But we're gonna do this vote to crown the champion of this battle for this year, and then the battle will continue to rage on. And then, if people do want to stay around, we have just a couple more slides, and then we can do some Q&A. As long as Bob and Richard, if that's okay with you, if you guys are okay on time, then how does that sound?
Sure.
Yeah, that sounds good. I've kind of been keeping a scorecard as we've been going through this, Gabe. Can I just kind of go over what I've got here with you real quick
Yes,
before
please do.
people?
Because
Yeah.
honestly,
So
I don't know
you know,
if I know how to bring this poll up on
okay.
on Zoom. So
Well, while
go
you're
ahead and take it
figuring
away,
that
Bob.
out, Richard's a math guy, right? He's a brilliant man. He may not know this, but I was a math major in college as well. So I've been keeping score here while we've been going through. So let me just run down a few numbers here before you guys decide who's got the birdiest yard. So in the category of warblers, I think I've got Richard by one. It's 32 to 31. In the category of rare birds, Richard's got me 2 to 0 there. I'm going to give him 2-0. In the category of hummingbirds, I think we each scored 2 there, so that's a tie. Flyovers, I'm going to give Richard the edge there. He got 3. I probably have 2, so he's up 1 there. In the case of wintering sparrows, I think we ended up tied there, 2 apiece. Obviously, I got to give the nod to him on vireos. He's up 7 to 5 on that one. So that's a total of 47 to 45 at this point. But when you add the total number of birds seen in a yard to that total, Richard's 158, mine 173. That brings my total up to 218 to Richard's 205. So I think clearly we can all see that the birdiest yard in Georgia is my yard.
Thanks for doing that. Yeah, if folks, I've posted the poll, so I'm seeing the numbers right now, and it's a close battle right now. If you want to go ahead and vote for someone just for the fun of it, I'll give it I don't know, 20 more seconds, and then we will announce who's the birdiest backyard champion of the world 2025. I'm gonna give it 20 more seconds here. and then we'll share the results. And then yeah, if you want to stick around for a couple more slides and a Q&A, then you are welcome to. But thank you all for attending this event. And yeah, Richard and Bob, thanks for being great sports. All right, we're gonna go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, I'm gonna share the results now, and I must say, I think maybe this result could have been influenced by someone got a little bit more media coverage via YouTube, and I might have played a role in that. And so the champion of 2025 birdiest backyard of the world. I don't know if you guys can see that. Richard comes out with 63% of the votes and Bob with 38. So there you have it.
Well,
It was a great battle. And of course, this is all for fun. And
well,
yeah.
to be honest, I voted for Richard George too.
Ugh. Well, yeah, let's continue. Let's yeah, folks need to leave. Feel free to head on out, but we will do a couple more slides here and then open up for some Q&A. And yeah, Richard, you want to talk about Eurovision?
Oh yeah, so this was just a bit stupid. I thought I might have to angle a bit harder because clearly Bob's Yard is the best in terms of species diversity, and that's that. So I was scrounging for votes here. After I posted my warbler bathing video on social media, a French guy associated with this French birding website, ornitomedio.com, reached out to me to say, like, we're interested in how you got so many birds. And so there's a little article about my pond on a French national birding website. And yeah, I often combine birding with watching the Eurovision Song Contest because it's in late May. So we can beam the show onto a screen here while kind of looking for, Connecticut warblers and other things in the background.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's cool how you have your yard has grown into different areas and you've been able to kind of cross-pollinate with some other fun activities and media. Yeah, another way you've been having fun with the yard is with these location names.
Yeah, so yeah, I'm a fool, and we can all name our yards, and most people just put home or my house, or I decided to have a little fun with it. And so every time an unusual bird sort of shows up, so last winter I ended up with like 100 red-winged blackbirds, and it was a complete racket. So I called the yard Ictuid Inferno. Then I started getting flocks of Baltimore Orioles coming through the yard, so it was Oriole Oasis. Um, and then, when the hooded oriole showed up, birders use this abbreviation for bird names. They call them bird banding codes. So rather than writing out the whole name, you often take the first two letters of the first part of the bird's name and the first two letters of the last part. So hooded oriole has the dubious distinction of being Hoor. I won't say that out loud. But since I hosted this hooded oriole for a week, I think my favorite bird name was the best little whorehouse in Georgia.
Oh, that's hilarious. Yeah, I didn't even know you could change your location name. So that's pretty funny. Um, And yeah, now I want to, before we dive into questions, I just have a couple more slides here. If people are interested in delving deeper into birds, native plants, what they can do in their yard, there's so many great resources out there. The book on the right, The Natural Communities of Georgia, is a really fantastic resource to allow you to understand from a landscape perspective where your yard kind of fits within the amazing natural communities that we have across the state, and that can help you inform and make decisions about how you manage and what plants you plant in your yard. But there's so many great resources from iNaturalist, Georgia Native Plant Society, UGA has great plant sales, and extension office has some great services, and so these are some great places to deepen your knowledge. I will also mention if you all want to get a better understanding of what Richard and Bob's yard look like, I actually had the pleasure of putting together videos of their yards for our wildlife sanctuary tour when we made it virtual during the pandemic. And so on our YouTube page, you can go look up Richard and Bob's videos. And Richard does have the lead in terms of number of views, but his video has been online for a year longer. So I don't know what, maybe Bob, after a year, you're gonna be at moving at a higher rate, but neither of you have the crown for the most viewed sanctuary video on our YouTube page. That has to go to um, um, Rick and Sandy over in Lilburn, and they have 23,000 views. It's actually our most viewed video online, but really cool to see a lot of people interested in this stuff, and I myself am quite interested in it, and I like making videos myself, and I made a video about Richard's yard, and so you can go and look all of those videos up online if you want to see a nice visual representation of what their yards are like and learn a little bit more about each of those. Um, and lastly, just wanted to mention we have some awesome Fall Flyway Festival events coming up. Tomorrow we're going to be out at Wilburn Farm. Saturday we have a Bio Blitz out there. We have a really cool private lands birding event down in Central Georgia on the 27th. And then we have a field trip on October 2nd. We also have some cool merch if you're interested in Fall Flyway merch, connecting birds to native plants. But that's enough about Fall Flower Festival. Let's dive into a couple questions, and feel free to head on out if you need to. But looks like we have a couple questions here in the chat. We have Bob, how did you initiate jewel weed in your garden? Someone tried spreading seeds they collected, but they didn't have any luck with it sprouting.
Well, in our case, we actually got some volunteer plants from friends of ours, which we planted in the spring. And after that, it just took off because of the way it reseeded itself. If anybody wants some jewelweed plants, I'll be happy to provide them to them. Just look me up, and if you're in the area, come over and get some.
Yeah, and I'll say, yeah, jewelweed is an annual. And so yeah, it will spread prolifically by seed, but if you don't have wet enough conditions, it will struggle. And Richard might be able to speak to that actually. I think he's trying to get some
Yeah,
jewelweed started in
yeah,
his yard.
I've tried twice now, and essentially these last two kind of like late summers, there's often been time when I've been traveling, and I haven't been able to sort of water the yard, and my yard's just a bit too dry for them. So yeah, if you are going to try, I'd certainly recommend sort of putting it in. If you've got like a natural depression in your yard, or you've got a place that's irrigated, I think you'll have a lot more success.
All right, next question is I'm going to combine two that are interested in learning more about water features. So, can you both discuss a little bit about the maintenance required for your water features and then also the construction materials? Did you use a rubber liner? What's the size of the pump? Just any kind of water feature knowledge regarding maintenance and setup.
Yeah, I mean, I can go first. Mine, mine was handmade. It basically is pond liner that was laid down. So basically, dug out a trench, laid down pond liner, and I had a natural sloping area where at the end I put in a plastic rubber pond, and then used a fairly good sized water pump. I happened to have a bunch of fish tanks, so I had one handy, and piped it back up to the beginning of the stream, let it run down. Then once I got it working, I filled it with rock and that kind of thing. What I did, the mistake that I made was I didn't seal between the sheets of pond liner, so the water backed up and I would lose water that way. So I had to kind of take it apart and then seal up those seams. On an ongoing maintenance, it's really just cleaning leaves out of the little pond at the bottom, making sure that the pump is pumping water, etc. Pretty much takes care of itself. Have to top it off every now and then due to evaporation and splashing, but other than that, it's pretty much it takes care of itself.
Richard, anything to add?
Um, yeah, not a lot. I have the same thing that yeah, I cheated, got mine in installed. Maybe what I'll add is that you can if you Google pondless waterfall kit, you can find these setups that have all of the kind of like the tarp, the pump, and the piping you'd need to create a string that recirculates water without a pond at the end. So you can buy these kind of pre-assembled kits, and then all you would need to do is kind of like dig them in and add some landscaping rocks.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, thank you for that. Yeah, info. I'll add really emphasize what Richard, you were saying. Any water really is a great resource. So even if you can't have a water feature with moving water, just getting some water out there. I actually currently am experimenting in my yard with a dish with a gallon jug hung in a tree above it with a tiny hole where it's just dripping water slowly out over time, and that's gotten already some birds coming in. So you can do a lot and be quite creative. But the next question we have is, what time are you guys typically listening for nocturnal flight calls?
Mm. Uh,
Well, I
yeah, go ahead,
mean,
Bob.
usually a couple of hours before dawn are when birds are starting their descent is the best time to listen. So between, depending on what time sunup is, that's usually around 5 o'clock in the morning or so in our case.
Yeah, and some of that for me is like practical reasons as well. As you probably heard during this webinar, I live in a pretty trafficy neighborhood, so it's quite noisy at like 9 o'clock at night still here, whereas 5 in the morning it's a lot quieter. And because there's cooler temperatures too, I think the sound travels better and there's less insect noise. So actually I have more luck in the spring migration in detecting nocturnal flight calls because I don't have all of these like cicadas and katydid noise in the background. So morning's better, and for me, spring is a bit better too.
All right, we've got two more questions here. Um, Someone's asking a really interesting one. If I know my next door neighbor sprays their yard with pesticides or herbicides or has outdoor slash feral cats, should I still try to plant native for birds, or am I setting them up for a death trap? What are you guys' perspective or thoughts on that?
Man, I'd almost let you answer that one, Gabe. It's I mean, outdoor cats is a tough discussion point. Um, I
Yeah.
still think anything you can do to provide birds protection, habitat, etc., is good. I don't know that there's a trade-off, but what do you think, Gabe?
Yeah, I think it kind of is certainly a really good consideration to make because um, uh, cats are incredibly bad for birds, unfortunately. And I think the way that I would try to approach it is maybe seeing if you can have conversations with your neighbor. I know that's like a really difficult topic at times. But being mindful and paying attention, I would say don't just give up and not try to do anything. But maybe if you start with some native plants in pots on your front porch or something, see if you can just observe and help some insects out. But the other thing is, you could consider getting involved at a local park or green space where maybe that concern is a little bit less, and you feel like your investment of time and effort is a little more of a safe investment. But yeah, it's a really tough one to navigate, and I would say you shouldn't immediately shut it down, but maybe try to explore and pay attention. If you sort of notice negative impacts, then scale things back. But yeah, that's the unfortunate reality of what a lot of us are dealing with, and really the importance of trying to get people interested and excited, and understanding and thinking ecologically. That's really such a huge part of the value of starting where you are, using what you have, and doing what you can. It allows people to develop an ecological understanding and kind of just mindset that allows them to realize the impacts of their actions. And so that's a really great question, a difficult one. But that's kind of my perspective on it. Um, yeah, if you guys have anything else to add, feel free to. But the next question is, how many of these plants are deer resistant?
Mm. Is there such a thing?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, I was very lucky up until now that because of the nature of where I live and it being fairly urban, I didn't have deer in my yard. But this summer I went away and I came back, and sure enough, there was a deer foraging in my backyard. So I just sort of barricaded. I just have little wire fences, and that seemed to have been keeping them out. But now I've put some bamboo spikes. So there's a lot of invasive bamboo around the edges of my yard, and I use an excuse to cut it down and build a barricade.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely tricky. And, there's certain plants that deer find a little less palatable, certain mints. But the way that you plant your plants, yeah, can be helpful. And yeah, it's kind of a tricky journey that you kind of have to learn trial and error. And every yard is different depending on where you are and what your population looks like near you. But a worthy consideration when, yeah, doing big plantings. That's another reason why it can be helpful to do a little bit at a time because you can start and learn from your mistakes or what the deer like to eat and learn and then scale up. The last question that we're going to end with here is, do you ever have issues with predatory birds stalking your feeders?
Um,
Well, yes. I don't know if I call it issues. Um,
yeah,
Hawks like birds.
yeah,
Sometimes they eat them.
yeah. I agree, and I don't take issue with that. Like I haven't had an issue where I felt like the hawk was taking so many birds that it was ruining my experience. I guess if I did feel like that, I could take down my feeder, but that hasn't happened. But I think this is another point to like, thinking about your yard holistically beyond feeders. Another thing that providing canopy complexity, lots of shrub layers, are places that birds can hide, right? So quick refuges. If you've got shrubs in your yards close to your feeders, if a hawk comes in, a bird has a chance to dive into that shrub and escape that predation event. Where if you just have a feeder in a very sort of bare open yard, maybe they're going to have a harder time to get away. So you can think about your native landscaping and sort of give your songbirds a kind of fighting chance.
Yeah, excellent point. That's very true.
Yeah, really, really good. And once again, yeah, that kind of highlights the yeah, the nature that everything's connected, everything's playing a role, everything is important in one way or another. And yeah, creating a wildlife sanctuary is not just for birds, it's for all kinds of wildlife. It's not just for certain types of birds, it's for all kinds of birds. And I think with that, once again, I want to say thank you to everyone who has attended, and a huge, huge thank you to Bob and Richard for being great sports, for allowing their wonderful, fun competition to come to life on this webinar. And thank you for doing everything that you guys have done for birds and birding in Georgia. Um, yeah, is there anything else either of you want to add, or are we good to call it good night?
Uh,
Uh,
I just want to say I think Bob's yard is amazing. I saw that like fairly early in my time in Georgia, and definitely, it was an inspiration that we can get really cool birds, even in a relatively small suburban yard. So yeah. I give Bob a lot of grief on social media, but you know, I think his whole setup and the birds he attracts are really like inspirational.
Thanks, Richard. I just want to say that I'm going to be filing an official grievance with the ABA and the AOU. It was pretty clear that you used a professional production company when you put your slides together, and that's against the rules of this organization. Clearly in violation, and it also appears that you probably stole the writers from Jimmy Kimmel's show while he was been on hiatus, because there's no way you could have come up with that stuff yourself.
I'll let you touch my trophy, Bob.
Thanks, guys. That was a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you guys so much. That was an absolute blast. All right. Well, I hope the rest of fall migration treats everyone well. And yeah, I hope to see you at a Fall Flyway Festival event or elsewhere at a Birds Georgia event or in the field birding. But with that said, happy birding and everybody have a great night.
Thanks.
Thanks, Gabe.